Hey guys, it's Amelia Singer here on Ameliarate Through Wine, where I pair wine to international guests based on their palate, personality, and personal story. I am thrilled to announce that this podcast is being vigorously propelled by Rothschild Wine Collection from Good House Waddesdon. Now, this really is a name synonymous with a century-old legacy of art and wine craftsmanship. I really couldn't think of a better pairing for this wine and culture podcast. From the early 1920s to the present day, the Rothschilds' profound love for both wine and art has been at the center of their journey. The family's artistic heritage distinguishes the label, often giving a unique story which adds an extra dimension to the exceptional wine. With handcrafted bottles created by inspirational artists, mesmerizing wine cellars, and even the family members themselves designing the labels on the wine bottle. The Rothschilds' timeless commitment to the fusion of wine and art is a legacy to inspire wine enthusiasts and wine connoisseurs alike. For more information, visit goodhousewaddesdon.com. And now, sit back, pour yourself a glass, and enjoy. Hey guys! Well, on today's Ameliarate Through Wine, I have the inimitable Loyd Grossman, OBE, CBE, who also has quite a few honorary doctorates. You are a food lover who has presented the original Masterchef and are the innovator of celebrity food with your iconic sauces range. You're also a journalist, published author, and your love of history and the arts has led to leading roles in cultural institutions, from English Heritage to the Art Society, the Royal Parks, and the Royal Historical Society. And you have also, since 14, always been a guitarist in a band, and you've played at Glastonbury 8 times. But you must be the only punk rock guitarist to ever chair the church's Conservation Trust. You are a man whose lifelong enthusiasm is a true inspiration, and you're someone who lives by their own coat of arms, which bears the motto, if not now, when? Loyd Grossman, it is a pleasure to have you in my home. Just don't judge the decor.
Oh, it looks really nice.
I was going to say, it's a very eclectic. How would you describe it, Loyd?
Well, when we did Through the Keyhole, it was very funny. People used to think, because you're doing Through the Keyhole, you must actually be really interested in it. I wasn't remotely interested in people's decor, but it was entertainment. It was entertainment. So you had to say something. And it was comedy.
No, absolutely.
It was comedy.
Do you think such a show would be allowed now?
Yes. Oh, gosh, definitely. I mean, it was, when it started, it seemed very controversial because it was really before things like Hello Magazine and OK, before every celebrity did
Cribs.
Kind of an at-home thing. So, it was very controversial then, but subsequently there's so much about celebs at home. And as you say, Cribs is basically Through the Keyhole
for America.
For MTV.
Yeah.
So no, it wouldn't be, it wouldn't be remotely unusual now. And we'll probably bring it back at some stage.
That would be amazing. Well, before we go down kind of your wonderful career trajectory, I was going to focus more with the first wine on kind of your loves of wine now.
Yeah.
And I know that you love your Chardonnay from Burgundy, but I never ever give guests exactly what they want because I like them to try new things.
So
and
it's just like being at home, basically.
Exactly. And so we're actually going to be having...
Yeah.
An English Chardonnay, because I was curious.
But in English Chardonnay?
An English Chardonnay, because I wasn't sure how much English wine that you had actually tasted. And these guys are really interesting because he, like you, is an American. He also, like you, was very involved with the music scene back in New York.
Really?
Came over to England, got involved in hospitality, then fell in love with wine. And now he has an incredible urban winery underneath the Battersea Arches.
Really?
Which is great to visit. And this is a really fun, and it's called Pygmalion Chardonnay, which I thought you would like due to the classical and literary references. But it's also due to the fact that Pygmalion was apparently the first play to ever be performed in the first ever theatre in London, which then burnt down in the fire of London. And then the Royal Opera House then got built on top of it. And I know that you love opera. And so on the label design, that floret there
Yes.
is meant to replicate the florets in the dome, the interior dome of the Royal Opera House. And so all of their wines, where the Chardonnays tend to have more visual like references to art around London because they're big London lovers. And then their kind of experimental range has more references to London public transport systems, which I know you've also written about, and you're very into architecture. But I just thought, given the background of trying to promote English provenance, English craft, their music background, American in the UK, I thought that their story rather aligned with yours, and I was curious to see what you would think.
How fantastic.
So this is actually, it's 2020, which was an amazing year for English wine, from Crouch Valley in Essex. And Essex is perhaps the driest region we have in the UK, so it's amazing for Pinot Noir, and also it makes some stunning, stunning Chardonnay. And this is probably the most Burgundian in style they do, which I thought would lean towards your tastes.
Well, I've had not a great deal, but I've had a variety of English wine, which has been pretty impressive. I just had, what did I have the other day? I had a Chapel Down Bacchus the other day,
fantastic.
Which was very nice. Yeah. And a mile from home in Chipping Campden in Gloucestershire, we have someone who makes sparkling wine called Little Oak.
Oh,
which is a very nice.
Those. Yeah.
Oh, it's good. Oh, we really like Little Oak. And then there was I had a very expensive, actually very good English white the other day. Is it called Woodbridge Valley? Woodchester?
Woodchester, yeah.
Woodchester.
That is good,
That's very good. It's expensive, though. I mean, it's nearly £30 a bottle, I think.
Well, we say it's expensive,
but maybe it's not expensive.
Well, this...
Maybe it's not £30 a bottle. I thought it was about £30 a bottle.
Again,
maybe it's 20-something a bottle.
We don't quite, we don't quite have the infrastructure as other kind of classical wine regions do. But this I think is really fun. It's been aged, I just want to make sure I've got them. I want to say it's been aged for about 24 months. On the dead yeast cells, the lees, which gives it a lovely nutty element. And there's 35% new oak, which I think gives it a slight sweet spice. But really what should come through is the acidity. I know that you like your minerality in wines, but you get like a little bit of pineapple, a little bit of dried tropical fruit, because it was a really sunny year, 2020, unlike this summer.
It's good. I mean, oddly enough, if I didn't know it was Chardonnay, it would take me a minute or two to get the Chardonnay bit of it.
Yeah. I mean, it is made from two different clones, one from Burgundy and one from Germany. And so like...
maybe it's the German thing that I'm tasting.
That gives more aromatic. That gives more floral aromatics.
Yeah, I'm getting something quite floral.
Yeah.
So maybe it's the German bit.
Check you out.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's good. It's good. Black Book. So is that the name of the winery?
That's the name of the winery. They work with growers who are only a few miles away from London, because they're all about trying to keep their carbon footprint down.
Yep.
And again, all their wines can be found on their website. So this is about £28.50. But again, considering this is like very low yields, it was made in a great year. And again, with the extensive kind of oak aging, I think it's a really elegant.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see, because as you know, of course, the champagne growers in particular are buying a lot of land, mostly in Kent. It's going to be interesting to see if other French winemakers begin to move into England.
For still wine as well.
For still wine. Or if our indigenous makers will be able to fend them off.
Well, it's an amazing amount of land which has been sold anonymously to... Yeah, exactly.
Probably to people like the Perrin family, or, those big winemaking. They must be, because of what climate change is doing to the French. Yeah.
And they're already having to use different grapes in Bordeaux. They're now allowing varieties which had never been allowed before. So what can you do? But no, I'm glad that you like this one, because I was going to ask... So
am I allowed to have one of these blinis
yes, the blinis, exactly. Well, actually, I thought we should have something fishy, because I thought you'd love seafood. You grew up in Marblehead in Boston. I love Marblehead. My mum's from Boston. My godfather actually lives in Marblehead, a gorgeous coastal.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
So I visited quite a few
Very good
times.
Lobster.
Very good lobster. Sorry, there's no lobster today. Next time, Loyd. Next time.
Those are very good.
Good. I was wondering, so you were born kind of Marblehead. Actually, I think you're originally born in New York, but then after 4 months...
I was born in Boston.
Sorry, born in Boston.
Yeah.
And then when you were 4 months old, they moved out to Marblehead.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, what was the wine scene like when you were growing up with your family? In like 60s?
I don't think there was a wine scene. No, there wasn't a wine scene.
I was thinking, because American wine then would not have been great.
American wine was pretty bad. There was a lot of stuff coming out of the Finger Lakes.
Yep.
And some of it, I mean, just the other day, I had a very good, actually really, really good dry Riesling from one of the Finger Lakes.
New York wine, we actually just had some last week on the podcast.
Yeah?
Some really good, yeah.
I think some of it's really good. And I also have had some decent Chardonnay from Long Island, which is interesting.
We had a lovely Cabernet Rosé, Cabernet Franc Rosé.
Did you?
Yeah.
Because so, I mean, New York wine in the 50s and early 60s was pretty grim.
Well, Prohibition is a lot to answer for.
I think it took a long time. But also there wasn't, outside of cities that had either a very sophisticated population or a very ethnic population, there was no indigenous cultural tradition of wine.
It was probably more
beer and spirits. Because,
yeah.
Americans are very big on American whiskey and bourbon and all of that kind of stuff. So the wine scene, was pretty grim. There was one very good kind of Fortnum's type of shop in Boston called S.S. Pierce, who sold very good wine. And in New York, what were they called? Sherry Lehman.
Which just shut last year.
Who were the great. I mean, they really changed.
They've been around since like 1934 or something. Yeah.
And they were incredibly important in promoting knowledge of wine in the 50s and 60s. But basically, coastal New England in the 50s and 60s is not where you went to drink a lot of wine.
Did your parents ever drink wine or family dinners or occasions?
Very rarely. So sort of Thanksgiving.
And what would the wine be?
Maybe 2 or 3 times a year. Oh, then it would have been something proper, something French. But really, I guess like most Americans of his generation, if my father wanted a drink, he would have a Chivas, Chivas on the rocks.
Yeah. Yeah.
And nothing else. And that was it.
Well, you watch Mad Men. No one's drinking wine in Mad Men.
No. So, I mean, I never saw my father drink anything other than whiskey and water or whiskey on ice. Never beer. Wine maybe twice a year, that sort of thing. So it wasn't really a very winey kind of culture.
And I mean, obviously you have an amazing palate. We're going to go more into what you've been able to do with your incredible palate. But how did you really then first engage with wine then, if it wasn't so much when you were growing up?
Well, I think kind of by the time, I think when I was about 16 or 17, there was a family friend who was very keen wine buff, which seemed rather eccentric. And that was when, I suppose at age 16 or 17, that's when I had my first really kind of great wine and realized that, there was something really quite special about it. But otherwise, in the sort of late teenage years, one drank, students in America, you drank a lot, especially if you were a student who was in a band.
I was going to say, you probably spent 97% of your student time performing and
attempting to perform and rehearsing, but also, and so there was this terrible, like the worst wine in the world, which we used to drink as teenagers because we thought that, people like Muddy Waters used to drink it. Have you ever heard of Thunderbird?
No. Am I missing out?
You are missing. You have had such a sheltered life. I can't believe you're actually doing a podcast. I mean, honestly. Thunderbird is a 17.5% fortified wine.
That sounds like Buckfast.
Oh, it's kind of like Buckfast.
I've had Buckfast.
Yeah, it's like it is a fortified wine. It used to come, I think you used to be able to buy it in a gallon jug. And it was made by Gallo.
No.
Yeah. It was Gallo's, it was the Gallo wine for the less affluent. And I think someone memorably describes it as they said, Thunderbird is the one that put the ill in swill. So in the band, being really cool, we used to sort of hit the Thunderbird quite heavily. And there was another one as well. There was another one that was so bad, it came in a big tin, like a tin of petrol, which was a sort of 2.5 gallon tin. I forget what it was called. Was it called Silver Spur? No, maybe it was called, I think it was called Night Train or something like that. And, once again, it was just a head-banging kind of
Which
wine.
is perfect for students.
Perfect for students. Yeah.
And, those all sound fantastic, and I'm actually really intrigued. But what would you say, how would you enjoy wine now? Do you prefer drinking wine at home with friends and cooking? Do you prefer going out to restaurants and enjoying different wines?
I think it's always better at home.
Yeah.
Because restaurants, quite rightly, restaurants have to have a colossal markup on their
particularly
wine.
Now with the cost of living. Yeah.
And, if you're lucky enough to have someplace where you can keep some wine, what you don't do is you don't go to a restaurant and order a bottle of Petrus. You just don't do it. So obviously try to drink some decent wine in restaurants, but for really good wine, it's always at home or with friends or in a club.
What would you like to serve your friends?
Well, I like claret.
Yep.
I have very, very conventional taste. I like claret.
And congratulations, by the way, on being recently married.
Oh, thank you. We're drinking a lot of 09s and a lot of 10s now.
I picked the grapes at Chateau Aubryon 2009.
Did you? The 9s are great at the moment.
I'm sure that was all due to me picking,
I think so. I haven't, I'm afraid I'm not really up to the Aubryon level. But that's
a fantastic year.
Yeah, what have we been drinking a lot of now? Warm de Pez is drinking very well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Gloria. A lot of Gloria.
And what did you say?
Some Koss. Some Koss when I push the boat out, because I love Koss. Koss is almost my favorite of all.
And what did you serve? I know that you recently had a wedding party.
Yes.
What would you serve guests? When you're having a lot of people, what did you choose for a kind of a fun celebratory wine?
Well, yeah, it was a garden party, even though, of course, it was pouring with rain, most classic English way.
Wimbledon weather.
Yeah, Wimbledon, freezing cold, pouring with rain. And the occasional glimpse of sunshine. So we served rosé, pink diesel, which is this new one I've discovered, which I really
want to try. I've heard good things about this. It's female owned. Yeah,
it's terrific.
Really good.
Actually, it is a classic, beautifully made rosé of which you can drink a lot. And that's quite important for a party. So that, and then my cocktail du jour, which is I'm very into red vermouth.
Me too.
So we were serving big jugs of red vermouth spritz, which went down rather well.
I'd never heard of that before, but I think that's now going to become my summer drink.
Oh, it's a great drink. You've got to get, preferably. For me. Although I like some of the Italian red vermouth, I have to say. There are a few very good ones from Turin. I've been very much into Spanish red vermouth recently. And the Spanish red vermouth mixed with, I've been using that Graham Beck South African
love
method champenois.
That's the best value sparkling wine out there.
It's really good. And it's good enough to drink very happily on its own.
Oh, yeah, and the rosé is great.
Oh, I haven't tried the rosé yet. It's really, it's very, very good. So that's a Graham Beck vermouth, bit of soda, slice of orange, lot of ice. Is a very nice drink.
We were kind of chatting before how we both don't really like blind wine tastings because we just think there's other ways one can appreciate it.
Well, no, I don't like it because I'm no good at it.
I was thinking, though, do you believe, having worked so closely with food, do you believe in food and wine pairings, or do you actually think, if you really love a wine, or if you really love food, it's not that important?
Yeah, there's a whole lot of nonsense talked about food and wine.
Yeah, I was curious what you thought. Yeah.
And I mean, there are some foods which are almost impossible to pair with wine. For example, I mean, I love asparagus. Asparagus are almost my favorite thing.
That is tricky.
No wine, technically speaking, no wine goes with asparagus.
Yeah, because it dries it out. Yeah.
Nothing goes with asparagus. But I still drink wine with asparagus anyway.
Yeah.
Because I want to have a glass of wine when I have my asparagus. Maybe something really weird like a manzanilla would go with asparagus.
I think it's also how you prepare the asparagus, too.
Yeah. Well, lately, I mean, actually, we've been just roasting them with olive oil and salt rather than boiling them and putting a lot of butter or hollandaise on it. And roasted with olive oil and salt. You can have a Greco de Tufo with it or something, and it's pretty good. So,
And
but I don't like to make a fetish out of food and wine pairing. And these things, the things that all these restaurants are doing now, where there is the wine flight.
Oh yeah.
I mean, what is a wine flight?
I mean, I think it's a way for quite a lot of restaurants to flog some of their wines, which normally no one would order. But no, I mean, that's also what I love about you. And we're going to be talking more about this in our next one when we talk about your career. But you always approach everything with such enthusiasm and no pretension. And I remember you said on one podcast that actually you think pretentiousness is a cardinal sin. And I love how you appreciate things and you've got a great eye, but you're very, you just have no pretense. Do you think that's a kind of New England thing? Do you think that's being from America and just... I think it's kind of a New England thing where... Yeah, my mum can't stand snobs.
We're very kind of straight in New England, and slightly austere. Yeah. And wine, rather sadly, the only thing that takes the joy out of wine is the amount of pretentiousness that's involved around it. And I mean, my favorite bit of wine pretension now is when people talk about being wine collectors. Oh. When people say, I'm a wine collector, I just think, well,
I say, I'm a wine accumulator. I buy wine, which I just want to share with my friends and have fun with. It's not color coordinated. Yeah. I'm not buying to sell. I would never invest in wine. I buy to enjoy it. Yeah.
So wine does, I mean, there is still a lot of snobbery and pretension around it, which is sad because basically it's such fun and it's such a life enhancer. And when you go to wine regions, there's no pretentiousness there.
They're farmers.
They're farmers.
It's agriculture.
Even the grandest ones, are farmers. And the joy is so obvious, and pretentiousness is the one thing that can take that joy away.
I could not agree more with that sentiment. And on that note, we're going to move to the next wine.
Oh, good.
So now we're moving on to our second wine. Now you'd mentioned exactly, and you'd mentioned that you like your funkier wines. You talked a lot about like Greco de Tufo and Falanginas, but I decided we're going to go to Greece, and we're actually going to have an orange wine because you said that you're quite open-minded to orange wine.
Yeah, I quite like orange.
And this wine is actually, it's been imported by Hallgarten Wines. They're an amazing importer for Greek wines. I think for Greek wines, they're the best. And this is from Gaia Wines, which were the first real pioneers, like in the 90s, trying to champion Greek wines and trying to promote and protect native grapes, which could become extinct. And I know that you're a huge advocate for protecting English heritage. But also I kind of thought orange wine doesn't really fit neatly into a box. Neither do you, which I don't think you'd mind me saying.
Very clever.
I also think, yes, it is classical because it's the Assyrtiko grape, which is a native grape. Where in Santorini, it's spiritual, birthplace. Now, Assyrtiko is grown all over mainland Greece, but actually these vineyards have been around for 3,000 years. Used to be made in amphora. What Gaia are doing are paying a homage to the past by creating amphoras out of clay. So it's called clay orange. It's their clay Assyrtiko because what they're wanting to do is still retain the freshness and the purity, but they actually feel like the clay kind of gives an extra kind of succulent texture to the wine. But I mean, this is a bit of a wacky wine. I love it. I wrote my own tasting notes when I tried it a few days ago. I don't want to tell you what to think, but to make the color, so they take the Assyrtiko grapes, they crush the Assyrtiko white grapes, and they leave the juice in contact with the skins for 7 days to get that kind of amber hue, which I love and just looks joyous. And then after they've done that, they actually age it. Oh yeah, for 4 years. I had to check my notes because is it really? But they age it for 4 years on the dead yeast cells. So you get this again, I'll tell you what I think you taste from aging it on the lees, which basically means the dead yeast cells for those listening, because that way you can get extra texture, extra aromatics, extra color without having to put it into oak. Because it's all about purity. So clay is the only material used here. So I'm just kind of curious. And also this wine keeps on changing in your glass. It's very, it takes you on a journey. So we're being viniously transported now to Santorini, which I'm desperate to visit.
Oh, Santorini is great. It's very crowded.
That's what I've heard. You have to go
at the right time. You have to go when... Well, really, the only time to go when no one else is there is when it's in the winter, but then it's not so great. But it's pretty cool, Santorini.
Because I really
want... They have very good food there.
Very good food. We've got a Greek salad on the table because I think it will go well with the feta. But actually, there's a kind of candied nuttiness, which I like about it, like a kind of salty, candied nuttiness, which I thought would go well with the Comté.
This would go well with Comté.
But I mean, I kind of put with this one that on the smell is kind of getting salted toffee and almost like aniseed herbal freshness. But then there was almost like a dried apple ring intense, because the fruit almost takes a backseat from the 4 years. So then you get sweet spice, you get these kind of kind of a nuttiness.
Yeah, I'm getting a bit of fruitcake.
Yeah. Again, it's like, exactly.
Because it is that candied, combination of dried fruit.
Yeah. Which I think works really well with, again, either salty or nutty, intense cheeses.
Yeah, it's very nice with the Comté.
Yay. Great. Well, no, I just, I wanted to show it to you because, you said that you like your funkier wines. You love your history. I mean, Assyrtiko's got to be one of the most historic, indigenous grapes, which Greece has. And, Gaia all about trying to protect these native grapes. And I also know that you love your minerality, and I thought this would be an interesting one because
I think it's really, really good.
I just didn't know if you'd tried orange wine from Greece before, so I thought
not from Greece, no. And it would be this would go very well with any mixed sort of mezze type things. It'd be great with a spanakopita.
Yes.
It's really good, actually. I mean, I'm so thrilled that the Greek wine industry has really pulled itself together.
In the last 10 years.
It's unbelievable, the transformation in 10 years.
And when you go to Greek restaurants now, the wine lists are so great.
Really exciting.
And you're also not just seeing Greek wine in Greek restaurants too.
Yeah.
You're seeing them,
Well, you're seeing it in places like Noble Rot,
exactly.
et cetera. Some really good. There's a great Greek restaurant around the corner from you.
Okay, there's several. Which one are you thinking?
Is it called
Vori?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, that's my dad's place.
It's
we
great.
Love it
it's fabulous. I went there for the first time about 3 weeks ago. It's fabulous.
Oh my gosh, it's so good and really reasonably priced.
Well. Very good wine list.
Very good wine list. Yeah, because there's some trendy ones near me, which will remain nameless, which I've been very disappointed in the wine list.
I think they're overrated.
We can discuss off record.
Yeah, but Vori is so good. I
love it so much. Oh, I'm so glad you said that. That's mine and my dad's favorite.
Oh, good. Really, really good restaurant.
But I also like it because these guys, it's that juxtaposition of kind of paying respect to ancient ways of doing things, traditional grape varieties, but in a very innovative, relatable way. And I think that's kind of what you've been doing with your career, whether it's whether it's with food, whether it's kind of how you talk about music, your writing career, also how you're making being a livery on the boards of all these historical societies. You're making people realize the relevance and importance of heritage. But before we go into your kind of hybrid career, which I also think hypercareer is like summed up very well in orange wine, which doesn't fit into a box. I was really interested because people think of you coming from a cooking background, but actually, when you came to England was to study at the LSE, actually to study gin distilling was part of your
Well,
degree?
I didn't come to study gin distilling.
But that was part of it?
No, I was doing economic history.
So you're looking at distillate.
And so I was, like everyone who has to write a thesis, I was looking for a subject that hadn't been much written about. And no one had really written much about the economics of gin distilling in the 18th century. So that's what I...
Mother's Ruin.
Yeah. Mother's Ruin. So that's what I went for.
Wow. And it was while you were at the LSE, that's because you were already writing in New York anyway about music, but then you continued on being a journalist.
Yeah.
As soon as you came to the LSE, writing for like the Rolling Stones right from the beginning, which I think is amazing.
Yeah. I started writing for Rolling Stone when I was in Boston, when I was an undergraduate.
Oh, wow. So really from the beginning.
And then when I got to London... I think in London, I started writing for a magazine called Harper's and Queen, which is now just called Harper's Bazaar. And I think I wrote for the Times for a while and various people.
But it just seemed amazing how, like, already for Harper's and Queen, you were writing about design, you were writing restaurant reviews. Actually, I think, wasn't your first article actually about architecture, the architecture of the London Tube system?
Yeah.
So, like, you've always just been able to find outlets for your interests.
Well, I like to satisfy my curiosity.
Yeah. No, it's fantastic.
And I remember when I first came to London in 1974, one of the things that I was sort of amazed by was the Art Deco architecture of the London Underground. And I didn't know anything about it. So in order to find out about it, I got Harper's to commission me to write about it. And then I learned about it.
But don't you think, like, kind of going back a bit to our former conversations, actually helps coming maybe from another place and having like roots to be able to see things with a new eye?
Yeah, you see things with a new eye and with new enthusiasm. And, basically, I've been on holiday for 50 years. Yeah.
What a wonderful, wonderful way to live. I like how you said it's on holiday because it doesn't make it sound like you think you're an outsider or, that you don't feel at home here.
No, I'm totally at home here.
And you've been like making waves and making...
I must have some more of this.
Oh my gosh, yes!
I mean, are we allowed to have more? Oh my gosh,
yes, no. And
thank you.
Yeah, Oz Clarke was like, I don't see any spittoons here, thank goodness.
Yeah. Yes, thank God for that.
Yeah, no spittoons here. But so you started writing. Harper's and Queen was like really that. It
was the very hip magazine of the moment.
Yeah.
Because it was all about sort of trend spotting and all sorts of fun stuff.
And back then it must have been such fun to work at.
And it was great fun. It was great fun because that was a period when people took glossy magazines quite sort of seriously. That was a time when, when glossy magazines were really quite sort of culturally important and they were fun and, lots of stuff was happening. So it was very fortunate to be in the midst of that at a sort of high point in the whole development of the genre.
And you wrote so much of them, and I had like under a lot of pseudonyms too.
Yeah, at one stage, there was my great friend and fellow writer Nicholas Coleridge and I were sort of in the engine room at Harper's, and we were in this little sort of cubby hole, the two of us with our typewriters, just churning out stuff. We'd need to, write a couple of thousand words on something by the end of the afternoon. So, it was great. It was great training. I loved doing that.
Where do you think like this confidence came from to be able to like embrace, not feel like you have to know everything about restaurants or everything about design?
I think it's what someone once called ignorance-based decision making. Namely, I'm very bad at saying no. So I generally tend to say yes, and then I try to figure out how to do what I've agreed to, what I've just said yes
Well,
to.
you're an enthusiast.
Yeah,
That's what I love.
I like trying things.
Do you think that's also actually quite an American thing? Being enthusiastic.
Possibly. I don't know. I wouldn't want to make that distinction.
Fair enough. Well, wherever it came from, I like that had very much not only led to like a prolific writing career, but then also allowed you to embrace television and throw yourself wholeheartedly in, and again, a whole new industry. I mean, when you were doing Through the Keyhole, you'd never done television before.
No.
And that was like one of the first morning TV shows, right?
Yeah,
in the 80s?
It was the first in, I think maybe BBC launched slightly earlier, but ITV launched TVAM in February 1983. And people were pretty shocked because the conventional wisdom was that no one could watch television in the morning. I mean, why?
Because we'd all be busy cooking or working.
Yes, you'd all be busy cooking, having a fry-up or going on the way to work or something like that. And it was confidently predicted that, breakfast television would be a total failure because no one would watch it. And, of course, it became a huge success.
Yeah.
So it was great fun to be part of that. And I knew nothing about television, had no interest in television other than watching it. When I was asked to, hey, do you want to be on television? So I thought, well, might as well say yes and see what happens. And it was great. I mean, it was really great fun. And there were a lot of fabulously interesting people around.
Who was the most interesting who you got to see?
Well, the person who I worked most closely with, who was the most interesting, was David Frost.
Well, that, yeah.
Who at the time, I mean, it was quite bizarre. I mean, at the time, he was probably the most famous television personality in the world because he was he had a huge talk show in America and his programs here and Australia, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He knew everything about television. And I knew absolutely nothing. So it was really kind of amazing that we became very good friends, very close friends, and, worked together for about 30 some odd years.
Wow. And then there was obviously Masterchef, just casually, Masterchef, which you did for a decade. What was your background in food before then? Because I heard somewhere that you actually had never cooked anything until you're about 27 or 28 and that you taught yourself over a weekend 2 recipes.
Yes, which is...
And then you're like, yeah, I can cook.
Yeah. My family were real foodies.
Yeah.
So, from the time I was in my Moses basket, I was going to restaurants.
Nice.
Which was quite unusual at that time.
Yeah, I can see that.
So, I always loved food and loved reading about it and, the history of it and so on. And then I started writing about food a bit when I was in Boston. And then when I was working at Harper's, and Harper's, I mean, it's hard to believe because nowadays there's so many restaurant critics. But when I was working at Harper's, there were only 3 restaurant critics in the country.
No way.
Yeah. There was Faye.
Wow. Okay, yeah.
Faye, who was writing for, it wasn't called the Evening Standard in those days, I think, but Faye was writing for the London newspaper.
Right.
Bevis Hillier was writing for Vogue.
Right.
Oh, no, there were 4 restaurant critics. Larry Adler was writing for something called What's On in London.
Okay.
Which no one read. And then Harper's and Queen had this very distinguished tradition of restaurant critics, Clement Freud, Humphrey Littleton, et cetera, et cetera. Harper's hired a new restaurant critic who went on holiday without filing any copy. And the editor of Harper's at the time said to me, oh, my dear, he was Italian. He said, oh, my dear, you know all about food. You be the restaurant critic. I said, okay, fine. And that day I went to 3 restaurants and then I stayed up all night writing this piece of copy to be delivered the next day. And then I was the restaurant critic for 13 years.
Did you enjoy that?
It was great fun. I think the difficulty with being a restaurant critic is that you don't get to, when you're a civilian, you can go to the restaurants you like.
Yeah.
When you're a restaurant critic, you're always looking, oh gosh, there's this new vegan kebab cafe in Stoke Newington. You need to be looking for new places all the time. So it's a different experience.
Yeah.
And when you're in the restaurant, you've got to be taking notes. And so it's fascinating because you have such an intense experience. But you don't have that wonderful, relaxed, escapist kind of thing.
Could you still enjoy restaurants while doing that job?
Yeah, but it's more difficult to enjoy a restaurant when you're trying to focus on every aspect of it.
Yeah, I can imagine. So then I guess that background then kind of gave you enough credentials to then be put forward for Masterchef. Yeah.
Well, Through the Keyhole was...
Well, that was amazing TV credentials.
Was at that time. It was the most popular light entertainment program in Britain. So there was that, and then there was the food thing.
The food thing.
So I was asked.
So in 1990, you did Masterchef.
So I was asked to do Masterchef.
So now we've come to the sources.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, okay, this is great. I love the enthusiasm. You're obviously extremely talented, very intelligent. But then what made you in 1995 think, I'm going to create, obviously you wouldn't know quite how iconic your sauces would become. But how does one go from presenting and being a judge on an iconic food show to then thinking, I'm going to be producing sauces on a mass scale, which the public are going to want to buy?
Well, I always had an interest in product. And both sides of my family had actually been in the food business around 1900.
Hot dogs on your mother's side, right?
Hot dogs on my mother's side.
Right.
And bottling on my father's side.
Ah, okay.
So there was a kind of a residual interest. And see, I love pasta. I love pasta. And I got really bored making pasta sauce all the time because I seem to have been spending about half my life in the kitchen making pasta sauce.
That's a fair point, yeah.
Especially, if I came home at like 11 o'clock at night or something. I just thought, now I've got to start chopping the onions.
Yes,
so, So I thought, and there was nothing really very good on the market at all.
Was there anything?
Yeah, there were a few things. There were, the standard very mass brands. There was Dolmio, there was Ragu.
Oh, yeah, Dolmio, okay.
There was Paul Newman was on the market.
Paul Newman, okay.
But I wanted something that I thought had, more authenticity. And so, I spent a long time coming up with figuring out how to do it.
Because did that take about, I read somewhere 6 months or something?
Oh, it took a long time. A long time. And then I got it to the factory, because you come up with your master recipe.
What was your first one?
The first one was very straightforward. It was just a tomato and basil. Just very, very straightforward.
That makes you so happy when you said tomato and basil. It's like that just brings back memories. Yes. Sorry, continue. That's what I grew up on.
But it was really interesting because I came up with the recipe that I thought was really just right and sent it to the factory, and the factory did its test run and brought the test jars down to London to taste. And I I was really excited about it. I tasted it and it was absolutely terrible. Really bad. Oh, no. And I said to the guy who was running the factory, I said, this is awful. This is really awful. And he said, well, we followed your recipe exactly. And he then said, oh, but instead of using olive oil, we used water. And instead of crushed tomatoes, we used tomato puree. And instead, they'd substituted all sorts of weird things. And
why?
I said, why? And he said, well, you see, the thing is that with, olive oil, it makes the machinery very sticky and, it clogs things up.
No.
I promise you.
No.
And so there was so firstly, I began to realize that certainly in those days, a lot of people in the food business were, kind of interested in the engineering side of it because it's about production. So they were kind of technicians.
So they weren't interested from the product perspective.
They didn't really get it. So it took a long time to actually get them to believe that, there was a certain way the product had to be made.
How long did it take?
I think it probably took about a year until we were ready.
And you launched first with the tomato and basil.
Yeah.
And then it was like the Italian, and then you continued on the Italian range.
Yeah. And then, subsequent to that, I started doing some Indian sauces and some Thai curries because I love curries. And so that's how it started. I mean, I just, I knew being a lifelong food lover and having been a restaurant critic for a while, I kind of knew what things were supposed to taste like. That's what it is. I mean, once because someone said to me once, how do you learn to cook? I said, well, look, A, if you can read, it helps. And B, if you know what things are supposed to taste like, you can figure out how to do it.
Do you think that's like one of the biggest learning takeaways you got from that whole experience?
Yeah. And always to be, the reason the brand became an iconic brand is that because it was driven by taste and by nothing else. I mean, it was driven by taste.
Beats.
How do we make it taste good? And that's
every year it beats all these other, because now, of course, a lot of other celebrities,
Yeah.
I mean, what is your favorite celebrity kind of brand? Do you kind of either for sauces?
Uncle Ben.
Well, I read somewhere that you actually said that you kind of wanted to be Uncle Ben when you grew up.
I kind of want to be Uncle Ben or Betty Crocker.
I was so upset when
or Aunt Jemima.
Aunt Jemima.
But after death. Not yet. That's a posthumous thing.
I still remember the day when I discovered that Betty Crocker was not a real person.
I know.
It was devastating. It was almost as bad as Father Christmas.
I know, isn't it? It is fascinating because, people sometimes said, what is all this about, a personality brand? And the point is that, brands just used to invent personalities. They used to say, we need someone to be behind this brand to represent its values. Let's invent Betty Crocker. Yeah. So the personal or personality branding has been around actually for quite a long time. It's just that most of them were made up. But there were always real people behind brands. Guinness. Every label is still signed with Arthur Guinness.
That's so true.
Heinz, all these brands, or most of these brands started as personal brands.
Wow,
you do know that Captain Birdseye is not a real person. You know that.
Wait, what? I could talk. Okay, this is going to seem a bit. Well, actually, nothing is too sideways or segues with you because throughout all of this, you've always kept up your music.
Yes.
So
much to the detriment of the listening public.
So while all this TV was going on, all this writing, creation of sources was going on, you were always part of a band, right?
Yeah.
And you performed at Glastonbury 8 times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Was that slightly terrifying?
Yeah. But,
was that one of the most terrifying things, out of the things you've done? Because you've really put yourself out there in a lot of ways, but do you think Glastonbury was one of the most scary?
No, I think the most frightening thing I ever did was I played at Europe's largest punk festival.
Which one is that? I should know, but I don't.
In Vienna.
Oh, really?
A city you know well.
Yeah. They have the largest punk festival. Well, that doesn't surprise me.
Called Rebellion.
Oh.
Rebellion. And I came out on stage, and I have to say, Middle European punks are very hardcore, I came out on stage.
I have seen Eurovision.
I came out on stage, and there was this sea of really scary-looking Middle European punks, and I was being backed up. I was between bands, so I was being backed up by this fabulous punk band called the Pork Dukes, and that was a terrifying moment because I actually at that stage. That was a time where I actually hadn't been on stage for about 10 years. So it was the first time in 10 years that I was performing again. And that was quite scary. Yeah. But I survived that.
Do you have wine before you perform? Do you have anything on your
Thunderbird.
You have Thunderbird?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
I was going to ask what's on your rider.
Oh, I knock back a couple of bottles of Thunderbird. I've got to... I always find it so difficult to remember both chords and lyrics that I have to have a sort of cup of coffee before I go on stage.
Fair. Yeah. No, I can completely relate to that. So you've always kept up the music. You've also written an incredible book in 2020 on the Italian sculptor Bernini. Mm-hmm. But as well as all of those pursuits, you also managed to serve on boards of various historical organizations, educational boards, artistic organizations. How do you find the time?
I like being busy.
Fair. And I mean, I'm actually going to quote you. I don't always use people's previous quotes, but I think this is a really important one and I could really relate to this. Okay. You said, one thing that the pandemic has underlined or heightened is the need for us to think about well-being, not just in medical terms. The health of the nation requires art. It requires access to beauty, access to nature. We have to be spiritually healthy as well as physically healthy. And the arts and heritage are that bit of the whole well-being package that's become so important and has often been neglected. And I think that really resonated with me coming from a family who... Like my sister works in the arts. I guess I work in the arts. We grew up in a very creative family. But we also just we've always understood the importance of it in creating communities and, really valuing one's history and heritage. And actually, I would argue in the past, England would pride itself on its education, its culture. And yet our government really doesn't give too much funding, if any at all. So I was just wondering, what initiatives would you like to see being implemented to respect or replenish arts and heritage? And are there any other countries you think we can get inspiration from in regards to that?
I'm very worried that arts education in schools has been downgraded, and that there are many schools in which children don't have access to art lessons or music lessons. And I think that's something we've really got to address. Because, it's very fashionable at the moment to run this country down and say we're in a permanent state of crisis. But, if you think about it, amongst other things, we do lead the world in creativity.
That I completely agree.
We are the world leaders in the creative industries. And what makes that possible is education, is making people familiar with music and art. And we've got to really see that funding goes into that. I totally see the importance of the STEM subjects. Mm-hmm. And, we need to be a more numerate society. But, to sacrifice the arts and music in particular, I think is really dangerous and it doesn't bode well for the future because it won't help us to continue to be the world leaders in creativity. So I do worry about whether government have a sufficient appreciation of the importance of the arts, not just to practitioners, but to just everyone.
Everyone, yeah.
Because, it just makes life more fun for people and,
And again, it brings people together. And like wine, it's a life enhancer.
It's a life enhancer.
And it's meant to be for everyone and it's meant to be relatable. Yeah. And but again, it's about that needs education, that needs...
we need to we need to give people access to it because, if all children don't, for example, get a musical education, we're probably missing out on a huge amount of talent. You know, there are probably tens of thousands of brilliant potential musicians who will never have the chance because they were never given the chance. And, we really need government to take arts education more seriously.
Are there any way that we civilians can actually help support the arts more? Is there anything that people could be doing?
Well, philanthropy is very important in this country. And, we have great arts philanthropists. But you do need the state to, and I don't believe the state should, necessarily be holding our hands every single minute of the day. But in order for education to work, the state really has to be behind arts education. And it starts when children are very small. And I think that's somewhere where the government could play a really important role.
It's interesting when you look at other countries. I mean, you mentioned Vienna and Austria, but actually even in Germany, for example, everyone's going to the opera, everyone's going to art museums. It's not seen as a classist thing. And maybe also the fact that you come from America, you've always described yourself as classless here. You can see where the potential is, where there's so much richness, but it's just not, certain people in areas are not given access, or certain things aren't being promoted in the best way possible.
I think we still have a sadly elitist attitude. And government haven't helped in many even basic ways. I mean, when was the last time in which you saw a prime minister going into a museum or to the opera or to a concert?
They'll go to a football game. They'll go to a fairground.
But they won't, whereas if you look at, France, for example, the president of France is always at major cultural events.
That's such a good point.
And here, our politicians do not go to major cultural events, and they should do, if only to show that it should be part of everyday life. So
that just seems such an easy step.
But
Loyd, maybe you could run for PM in your next stage.
Never
say no.
Never say no.
What are you most excited then? Because I'm like you. Everyone seems very down in this country, but I'm an enthusiast.
Very optimistic.
I'm still optimistic. What are you most excited about in terms of England, in terms of heritage or the arts or things it's producing?
Well, I think we've just got, we are such world leaders in so many interesting things, in culture, in higher education.
In wine.
In wine connoisseurship. Maybe in production someday. We're so good at so many things, and such an international, such a cosmopolitan society, yet a society which has such a strong foundation in history and heritage, that there are great causes to be optimistic. So,
I agree. And on that optimistic note, I'm going to bring another wine and bring you to another place.
Oh, good.
I could not have you here and not use one of your sauces.
Oh,
and I must admit, everyone always talks about your Italian sauces, which are fantastic. And I talked about how I grew up with the tomato and basil original, but I really love your Indian range. And I remember when we were talking, so we've got the Balti here, which I literally didn't add anything to it because I was like, no, I just want it pure. Sorry, I did not actually make it. I cut things up, and actually Ben, who's behind the camera, who's too shy to come in front of the camera, actually prepared because I was just like a whirling wine dervish earlier.
Oh, I see.
So actually, kudos to Ben.
Right.
And I didn't add any extra spice to this at all. Just some carrots and courgettes were added.
Yeah, it's just for our 5 a day. Yeah.
But it's just so wonderfully fragrant, but not too spicy. And you don't need to add anything else.
No, Balti is really one of the great kind of crowd-pleasing curries.
Exactly. It's like for people who, it kind of unites the spice fans and unites the people who are like, I'm a korma person.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's quite gentle.
Gentle.
Caring and loving and gentle.
Well, and I love that. And I know that Mumbai is a place close to your heart.
Love Mumbai.
And like you love travel, and you've said that your favorite places, when I asked you what your 3 favorite places were, you said Paris, Rome, and Mumbai.
Mm-hmm.
So I took you up on Mumbai, and we're going to be enjoying this with some Indian wine, because you said that you tried some Indian wine before.
And this is a Sula.
It's a Sula. Again, I really thought they're probably the most well-known. They were the real pioneers back in the 90s.
Totally.
And I've actually met Ranjiv Samant, the owner, a few times. He's from India. Went off to, I think, Stanford.
He went off to California, didn't he?
Yeah, then he worked in tech.
Yep.
Then he came back to his family home region in Nashik. And was like, there's more we can do, because the region was just known for onions and table grapes. And so he then went to work in a winery in California, a small winery just for like 3 or 4 months, and then took actually the winemaker with him back to India. And they've worked together ever since. And I think now they've really helped put Indian wine on the map. I mean, he does so much in terms of advocating for Indian wine. There's now like 40 other vineyards in the Nashik region, which is, I want to say, northeast of Mumbai. I always get distances slightly wrong, so I'm just going to check this.
I know that it's relatively close to Mumbai.
I think you can drive there in 3 hours.
Yeah, is it towards Bangalore, maybe? Is it around that direction?
I'm going to before I get overexcited, because I tend to get a bit hyperbolic with measurements and distance. So it's from Nashik, which I hope I'm pronouncing correctly, and it's located some 135 kilometers, 85 miles northeast of Mumbai.
So it's 3 hours. Yeah.
3 hours, exactly. Yeah. And so they started off, I think, with kind of Sauvignon Blanc and Chenin Blanc, and now they've got Shiraz, which we're having here. They've also got Zinfandel. I know that you are not a huge fan of the fruity Zinfandel grapes. I decided to go for their Shiraz, which is from the Dindori range, which is not, they have an entry-level range, and then this is the next range up. Again, Hallgarten are the importers for Sula, but you can find this at various online retailers for about £15. And it's just been put into oak barrels for about a year. And what I like about it is you get like the kind of dark plummy fruit from a Shiraz, but then you also get a kind of smokiness as well, which I think works really well with the fragrant spices of the Balti. And I think the Viognier worked really well with your korma. With your coconut cream-based korma, the Viognier. But I know that you're not a Viognier fan. So
I have to say, I very much like the Sula Sauvignon Blanc.
Yes. And
I haven't had this one.
Well, this one, because the Sauvignon Blanc, I got Sauvignon Blanc, the Viognier, and this, and I cooked using your coconut-based korma, and definitely the Viognier was the best. Because its opulence and its creamy, satiny texture and whatever could stand up to it. But I know that you're not a Viognier fan. So I went for this, which is meant to be like kind of fruit-filled and a little bit smoky.
Oh, it's good. It's good. Very smoky.
It's very smoky. But that's why I think it works well.
Which is rather nice, actually.
Mm-hmm.
That's really good.
And actually, when I had some friends over on the weekend, because I was like testing
the
different sauces with the different wines. And what I did as canapes was I got hold of naan bread, crisped them up, cut them into little kind of canapé sizes, and then just did a dollop of all of your chickens and different sauces, and then just like tried them with the different wines. And I thought, actually, that's quite a nice, hearty kind of canapé.
That's a very good canapé.
Yeah. So people like that.
That is really good, this Shiraz.
Thanks to your amazing sauce, though, too. I think they work together.
It's a very, very good combination, actually. Really good.
So, that's about
really
15, 16 pounds. If you Google it, there's various wine importers who do it. But I just thought, given your love of India, these guys are such innovators. They also manage to, due to their solar energy, they're very big into sustainability.
Yes.
And they manage to, solar energy to account for 60% of their energy output. I mean, when they talk about sustainability, it's not just a buzzword. Sanjeev is a really amazing person.
I would, and I know this is really controversial.
Okay, yeah.
I would have this slightly colder.
Do you think, because that would kind of meet the smoking and you get more of the fruit aromatics?
Yeah, I think I'd love to try this sort of slightly chilled.
Well, I can put it in the fridge and we can try it a bit later.
No, it'll be fine. We'll try it at home. I'll get a bottle and try it at home and see what happens. I'm afraid I tend to like almost everything slightly cooler than it should be.
I know, but then I was like, I didn't want to mute in the smokiness with the chicken.
Yeah.
I know what you mean, though. I know what you.
Yeah, I think it would be quite interesting, chilled.
Okay, but what we can do is I'll put it in now. And then before you leave, you'll have had a good 20 minutes. And then we can see. Thank you so much, Ben, who made the curry.
Yes, thank you, Ben. No.
So,
and it's so smoky on the nose. It's so interesting.
No, I must admit, chilled, I can't wait to try. As I said, I wanted, because it's almost like when I first opened it, it almost like had to taste like a charcuterie packet. Like, you know what I mean? Like that kind of like savory, umami kind of element.
It would be extremely good with a hamburger.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Because
it's got the juiciness with the smoky. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
That would be very cool.
Are you would you serve Indian wine to friends?
Yeah.
So you're quite open-minded with like what you would cook. And,
absolutely. Yeah. Definitely. And I think, for anyone who knows anything about wine or has any interest in wine, it'd be really fascinating because most people just haven't had Indian wine.
I mean, did you only really come across it when you went to India?
Yes, only when I went to India. But I go to India a lot, so I came across it quite a long time ago.
When did you first start going to India?
I think I made my first trip there in, not that long ago, 2004.
Yep.
But, some years I've been 3 or 4 times. I go at least once a year.
What brings you back?
It's just the most fascinating place to go to. And you could spend, rather like Italy, you could spend every holiday for the rest of your life there and still not really get bored with it.
And I guess similar to Italy, obviously you have amazing food.
Incredible food,
the
amazing culture.
The people, the history.
I mean, everything.
Yeah. I mean, when you're, because originally you said like Mumbai was one of your favorite cities. What do you enjoy doing in Mumbai and like where do you like to eat in Mumbai?
Well, the great place in Mumbai is Trishna.
Yeah.
Which, in its own way is one of the great seafood restaurants of the world. But generally, I mean, there's a lot of very good food in Mumbai. The street food is very good because there are so many very expensive hotels there. The sort of high-end food is pretty fantastic, actually. I mean, I've had some of the best Japanese food I've ever had in Mumbai. And, it's just a very exciting city, really exciting. I mean, I love being everywhere in India. I mean, of course, I love Rajasthan because what's not to like? I love being out in the country and the desert and so on. But in terms of world cities, Mumbai is one of the most exciting places. Although I was just in Istanbul a couple of weeks ago, and I hadn't been there for at least 10 years. And Istanbul is now...
I used to love
has its kind of Mumbai qualities. I mean, it's really, there's so much going on there.
Well, Istanbul for me is it's really where East meets West.
Yeah, really it's so exciting. The food is amazing. The art is wonderful. Shopping is fabulous.
When you design like the kind of Indian region, particularly as India means so much to you, were you a bit nervous to do the culture justice when you created like that? Did you feel pressure?
Well, to an extent, but I kind of also felt that a lot of the Indian brands were kind of just trading on the fact that they were Indian rather than that they were really exceptionally good.
Yeah.
And my view was that, because Indian food is part of our culture now, very much part of our culture, I wasn't really worried about the issues around cultural appropriation. And I just thought, no, I want to make a sauce that is better than anything else that's on the market. And I want to do it without pretending to be Indian, so
Did you get any help coming up with your Indian sauces?
No.
Wow.
No, just
I mean,
really,
I was I had such fun cooking with all of them over the weekend.
just really worked on it. So for example, the label design, there are no kind of overt iconic references to Indian culture on the label design. We talk about the ingredients.
Yeah.
And
you say medium spice, which is helpful for people.
And, so it's basically about trying to make an Indian sauce that is really, really delicious and kind of reflects the fact that Indian cuisine is now part of our cuisine, and we're much better off for it.
What's your favorite Indian restaurant in London?
I like Indian vegetarian.
Yeah.
And I like, I don't want to single one out because there are a couple that I know if I mention one, I'm going to get stick from the other.
Could you say 2 or 3?
I
for
like
that
the ones.
Category?
I love those pancakes with coconut chutney.
Yum! Yes.
And I think people will probably be aware who the leading practitioners are.
Fair. That's very diplomatic of you. Where is your favorite meal they've been in the world? Or do you not really have a favorite meal in the world?
I think it's usually the one I'm just about to have. There's always this great anticipation.
So mine was your favorite meal of the day before coming here.
Really?
Oh, no. I was just because you're always thinking about the next meal.
Yes, because one's always thinking about the next meal.
Yes.
Yes. So it's the anticipation, I think, rather than the recollection. But, I like very simple food. Thinking back to New England, for example, there is nothing better in the world than a boiled Maine lobster with a huge amount of melted butter and a plate of chips. There's nothing, what else do you want?
And then I want actually a Californian Chardonnay with that, actually.
Yeah.
I don't want a French Chardonnay.
No, you want something American.
I want American wine with that.
So that's one of the greatest things in the world, actually, for a lunch or dinner or both. Sometimes in Maine, because I lived in Maine for a while, there were a few days where I had, just as a challenge, where I had lobster 3 times a day. Because it was very...
But you could have it. Yeah, I could actually...
Lobster Benedict for breakfast, lobster roll for lunch, and a boiled lobster for dinner. And in Maine, they even serve lobster at McDonald's in Maine.
No!
Yes.
How?
Lobster roll.
I have family there. I can now see, they've got...
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
I need to go visit them and check out the McDonald's.
I think just going for the dishes that are most characteristic of any place. For example, when we were talking about Vienna, Tafelspitz.
Yeah.
And if you say to most people, or to many people, oh gosh, this is so wonderful, boiled beef, most people will say, God, that's really boring and dull and uninteresting. You have boiled beef in Vienna, and it's an epiphany.
Or
it's
in
fantastic.
Verona, the bollito misto.
Or in Verona, bollito misto is one of the great things.
But if you actually describe it, it sounds like war food.
Yeah, if they say, it's a bit of boiled beef and a bit of boiled tongue, and you just think, oh, no.
Well, on this note, I know we have to wrap up soon. But I was going to say, if you had to choose one creative outlet to kind of keep on pursuing, what would it be between music, writing, TV presenting, cooking?
I think it would probably be writing.
So we can expect maybe another book?
Oh, yeah. There's another one in the works.
Oh, are you allowed to give us any...
No, it's shrouded in impenetrable secrecy.
Oh, okay.
But, I really wouldn't want to, I wouldn't want to stop playing guitar.
No, yeah.
I'm still trying to get better.
And do you still... play with Jethro
Yeah, I do my 3 gigs a year with Jethro Tull, which is great fun. Every December. Yeah.
That's cool.
It's very challenging because they're all really good. and I just get by.
Oh my God, no. I'm sure you're awesome.
Yeah, no, I'm not.
One last question before we get onto the wine confessional, which I've prepped for, but there's this one. What is an element of your life which you're actually most proud of, but which may not be so well known or you don't talk about?
I have no idea. I don't know.
I mean, I know that you are very proud of your two daughters, which obviously you do not talk about that often. And like, you're a big, like,
well, I mean, my
guy.
daughters are fantastic. So, you know, I'm very proud of my daughters.
Yeah.
But they're very able to talk about themselves. The family members who can't talk, but whom I'm very proud of, are my 3 wire-haired dachshunds, who I absolutely adore.
What are their names?
They are called Solomon, Jedediah, and Theodora. Not pretentious.
Just characterful.
Just characterful. So unlike my daughters, who are well able to to talk about themselves, my dogs can only just be perfect, and they need me to praise them.
I love that answer so much. Well, that wraps up nicely. But before we check out the chilled Shiraz, which I'm very curious about.
Yes.
This is the time for the wine confessional, where I ask guests to talk about an experience with wine. It could be memorable, it could be hilarious, but just something which sticks in their mind. I was wondering, what would you like to confess in the wine confessional?
Well, I think as a confession, I've already made the confession that my teenage friends and I drank Thunderbird. So that's a confession. In terms of memorable, I was very lucky. I think it was probably around 1980. I went to visit the Barton family.
Lynch Barton,
No, the Bartons at Leoville and like.
Oh, Leoville, yeah.
And we had this extraordinary vertical tasting of Leoville Barton.
Oh, wow.
You know, going back 60, 70 years.
And that setting is amazing.
That setting is amazing.
I've done CrossFit
The
there.
Bartons were extremely charming and interesting and entertaining. And then on that same trip, I went to visit the Muexes.
Nice.
And we drank some serious Petrus. That was that was quite special. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. No, that's definitely.
Yeah. So that's not a confession, but it's just a memorable moment.
Well, Loyd, this has definitely been a very memorable lunch for me. Thank you so much for making time in your extremely busy but wonderful life.
Thank you for inviting me.
And I'm glad that, we could share all kinds of wine. English, Greek, and Indian.
I know.
Wasn't it fun?
Ain't it great that, suddenly there's wine coming from everywhere.
Yeah. And
it's just, Mexico is producing some really interesting wine.
I want to go to the Valley of Guadalupe. It's apparently incredible.
Great stuff coming out of there. I think there's some interesting stuff coming out of Texas now.
Yeah. They're very good with Viognier, which you're not such a fan of.
Well, I might have to learn to like it.
I actually was very impressed with wines from Virginia. I went to an international wine fair in Paris, and there were some interesting wines from Virginia.
Yeah. And of course, I'm very keen on Argentinian wines. Firstly, because my family spent quite a lot of time in Argentina, a couple of generations in Argentina. And when my elder daughter was living in Buenos Aires, I would go out there to see her and really have some fabulous wine. I mean, some of the Malbecs out there are just remarkable.
Really, really stunning.
We don't always get the best ones here, although I do like Malbec. It's great.
No, I've spent quite a bit of time. I know, we don't always.
We don't always get the best
ones. But isn't it so
ones.
exciting that we're always learning, there's always new stuff.
I know, there's Brazilian wine, there's always new stuff.
Denmark now has a few wineries. I mean, Loyd, we're just going to be having fun for way more time.
Danish wine. Skål.
Skål.
Skål.